Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 10 JRPGs that surpassed my expectations. I just didn't think they were going to be this good when I first played them or even heard about them. So as a result, today's list is full of excellent games, so let's begin. Number 10, Final Fantasy XII. This one surpassed my expectations not once but twice. I'll explain in a bit. Before I played this game, I felt that the series had gone into a different direction. Still, this one looked very interesting and unique, so I decided to give it a chance despite my disappointment with the series. It sure turned out to be quite different than the others, but it was still a medieval adventure with steampunk elements and rich lore, like some of its amazing precursors. Except this game was huge! It felt kinda open world, massive, with a big war going on at the same time, and one of the worst protagonists ever in JRPG history. Well, I got a hold of the real main characters, Bash and Ash, and greatly enjoy the story regardless. Their past, their decisions, their journey, and their ordeals won me over. It was a more mature story than any other FF title before, but back then I didn't know Yasumi Matsuno had wrote a big chunk of it. Anyway, long story short, the game turned out to be a grindfest, and that annoyed me for a time until I figured out the magic system and ended up victorious in some nasty spikes. But the game surpassed my expectations twice with its remaster. It fixed most of the things that were wrong, like the skill tree system. It rebalanced the difficulty and made it less grindy, and visually speaking, it just looks freaking gorgeous. One of the best remasters I've played in my life. But going back to the original, it also exceeded my enthusiasm all the way till the end. And yes, Vaughn was in my main party at the end. He can suck my ass as a main character, but as a unit, he was pretty damn decent. Number 9, Scarlet Nexus. I'm not sure why I never included this game or the previous one in other episodes. I thought I did, maybe that's why. I played the demo before it came out and I liked it, but I convinced myself that it wasn't my type of game. Everything seemed fine, story, characters, graphics, exploration, etc., except the battle system. It was extremely intimidating. I don't think I did very well in the demo, but I still managed to beat the boss somehow. After that, I knew I would probably struggle getting into it. I mean, like in Astral Chain, every button in your controller does something important. Trying to locate which object you can throw, deciding which enemy to throw it at, maneuver the controls to do it, utilize special skills of your allies, evade or dodge at the same time. Man, it was a challenge! So when I finally got my hands on the full game, I played it on easy because I knew I would suck. Thankfully, I didn't. I pulled through, got over a few annoying spikes, and enjoyed an excellent, dark sci-fi story that involves some very tense character development, philosophical and religious stuff, as well as some cool plot twists. And yeah, I became a fan of the intimidating combat of the game. Number 8, Eternal Sonata. I have a funny story about this game I've never told before. The first time I played it, it was on the Xbox 360, and just take a look at that cover. It definitely looks like a colorful Rune Factory type of game with music involved. It looks childish, to be honest. Well, I watched some gameplay and knew it was an RPG with a battle system that looked, weird to say the least. I probably got it for dirt cheap, but I don't remember how I got my hands on it. I was convinced it was going to be a Harvest Moon rhythm game with some RPG elements or something. Well, thank goodness it turned out to be nothing of the sort. I got a nostalgic, melancholic, but also magical story about characters living in a really hard and lonely life in a fantasy world. The same world real-life composer Frédéric Chopin ends up in, trying to find out if it's real or if it's all just a dream. I also got me some extremely unique and overly creative combat, and I didn't even know it had a cooperative multiplayer mode. Yeah, for those who don't know, it sure does, and 3 players can each control one character during combat. But it's a blast playing it on single player as well. So I beat this version, and eventually I got my hands on the definitive and complete edition that is the PS3 release. I had a great time a second time as well. but it had already surpassed my expectations, so I knew it would be awesome. Number 7. Shadow Hearts. There's only one very simple reason why this game surpassed my expectations, because it wasn't the first one in the series I played. I started with 3, also known as From the New World. It was great and I enjoyed it, but it was full of dumb humor, ridiculous characters, most of the story not being that funny to be honest. Protagonist was also kinda meh, but the fan service was something, well, from the new world or even another world. It didn't disappoint. Anyway, I thought the entire series would be like this, full of comedy, dumb characters, silly light-hearted humor, with the occasional darkness surrounding them. So many years later elapsed and I never found the first 2 games anywhere, until I did. I got my hands on this gem and was impressed by the opening cinematic and its bloody madness. That won me over immediately. The more I kept playing, the more gothic, dark, bloody, bizarre, and horror elements I found. I couldn't believe how different it was from Shadow Hearts 3. It still had some comedy, but all of it inside of mature adult situations. I loved it. The gameplay was more of the same, but the enemy design, the characters, the music, and the overall atmosphere made it somehow more appealing to me. And the sequel was just as great. Number 6. Unicorn Overlord. Most of you don't know that Vanillaware was working on this game since the good old Dragon's Crown days. It was around that time that they announced it even, but we never heard back until about a decade later. Finally, it was revealed last year and released this one, 2024, to impress the heck out of me. I'm a big fan of the developer and also a big fan of strategy RPGs, so I knew this game just had to be good no matter what. But I didn't think they will revitalize the real-time strategy genre, just like the DioField Chronicle had done a few years before. I did watch the trailers, but for some reason I was always under the impression that this will be your average grid-based tactics game with low-budget graphics. Of course, the former turned out to be wrong. The latter though, well, the art style looked beautiful and the graphics colorful and the character designs are appealing, yeah. But in-game graphics still ended up looking like an indie RPG. However, that's not a bad thing, so I really had no problem with that. And sure, the story wasn't all that great, especially not with the localization, but it served its purpose well. What surpassed my expectations was the gameplay itself. First and foremost, I had no idea you will be able to freely explore the world, get into different side quests, recruit tons of characters, liberate towns, and free entire regions. Like I said, I thought for sure this will be more linear. And I just love real-time strategy RPGs like the Grow Lancer series, Ogre Battle, or the aforementioned DioField Chronicle, so these battle mechanics in short maps were so engaging and so challenging and intense for me that it brought back the addictive nature of the genre. Number 5. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. I became a big fan of the first game, which I covered in episode 3, so I was expecting this sequel to be just as good. What I wasn't expecting is that it will blow me away with 2 things. First, Kazuma Kiryu sharing the protagonism with Ichiban Kasuga. Kazuma is the main character of almost every single Yakuza game before these 2 games, and I'll be honest, I didn't know much about the guy since I had barely touched the series before, but in Infinite Wealth, I learned so much about him and his iconic badassery that I became an instant fan. Naturally, a few months later, actually a few weeks ago, I got Yakuza Kiwami, which is a remake of the very first Yakuza game ever, originally released on PS2. I also loved it and it surpassed my expectations by the way, but it's not what I consider as a role-playing game. Anyway, the second thing that impressed me of this RPG was the 2-party idea. I know it's not a popular feature in JRPGs, but I'm a massive fan of games like Final Fantasy IX and Grow Lancer 5, which offer the multiple parties feature story-wise for a part of the whole adventure. In this game, Ichiban and his party take up one whole chapter, while Kazuma and his team star in the next one. Plus, Sunhee wasn't a playable character in the first game, and they made her one in this sequel. So yeah, I wasn't expecting any of this stuff, therefore, What I already knew would be an awesome game turned out to be a super awesome game. Yeah, that's a cheesy way to put it, I know, but you get the idea. Number 4. Xenogears. Recently, I released an entire podcast based on this game alone. I can't believe I've never told my story before in any of the previous episodes, probably because I've said in other videos that while I love it, I don't think I'll ever play it again. It's an RPG with very frustrating exploration and dungeon design, but that doesn't change the fact that I still think quite highly of it and often recommend it despite its flaws. How it surpassed my expectations is a weird story. I got a bootleg copy of it back in 2006 or 7, I can't exactly remember, played it and never got past a specific mission with the mechs that annoyed the heck out of me, the mechs being the gears. Anyway, here's a screenshot of that mission. So, guess what, I rage quit and I never went back until years later when I got an original Black Label copy of it. This guy was selling it online back in 2010, so we agreed to meet. He stood me up, but later apologized and we agreed to meet again. He showed up, reduced the price a bit, and I got my copy for an extremely laughable price. I still own that copy. If you want the full story in detail, hopefully you'll give the podcast episode a chance. I'll leave it at the end. Anyway, so I now continued my file through this original version, got past that annoying area, and I met the absolute best story ever written for a video game in existence. That's right. And now that we're talking about the Xeno series, number 3, Xenosaga Episode 3. Oh boy, this one sure far surpassed my expectations, and again, I can't believe I didn't include it before. To give you context, you need to know that despite being a huge fan of the trilogy, I never beat the first 2 games. I made it pretty far though, you could say I did about 80% or more in both, but some nasty spikes destroyed my experience twice and I never went back to them. So imagine how I felt towards this rare 3rd and final entry in the trilogy. I wanted to play it, sure, but my expectations were low, thinking that I probably wouldn't beat it either, or that it will be the worst out of the 3. It had gotten some mixed reviews back in the day, I don't know why, but I knew about them. Plus, it was just so damn hard to find. So for years and years and years I forgot about the series, until one day this dude posted a PS2 Slim Complete in box for sale, which included like 15 games, most of them RPGs I already owned. This rare and expensive gem was there, so I knew it would be my chance to finally get my hands on it and play it. I'll admit, it was the first game that I tested, and I just couldn't put the controller down anymore. It took me less than 1 week to beat it despite being like 30 hours long or more. Yes, it was that freaking good, far superior than its predecessors. It took everything right from them and improved it and fixed everything wrong in them, like the convoluted battle system in Xenosaga 2. This was the absolutely incredible conclusion to the saga, and it did not disappoint. I wasn't expecting some of the most epic, emotional, tear-jerking moments that the story and characters had to offer, especially the protagonists Cosmos and Shion. Man, what a masterpiece. I know it's extremely hard to find nowadays, and since Namco refuses to remaster the trilogy, I think you're gonna have to rely on emulation. Good luck. Number 2, Triangle Strategy. The first time I watched the trailers of this game when it was announced, I thought it would be a Final Fantasy Tactics clone. I respect that game a lot, but I just haven't found the chance to get into it, so I'm honestly not a fan. So I kept my expectations to a minimum. I did get excited like any other strategy RPG fan because it was so damn rare for Square Enix to advertise a game of this genre. I couldn't believe it. But yeah, I watched the trailers and had my doubts. The demo came out, I played it and it hooked me up immediately. It sure had some Tactics Ogre influence, but it had a class system instead of a job system. And despite being quite challenging, it was just easier to approach. It also had these interesting perks in the battle mechanics that made it more dynamic. The story seemed quite serious with close to zero enemy tropes or silly comedy, so even though the demo was quite long, and before its release there was yet another demo, I still had my reservations. I loved what I played, but I couldn't get that much hyped up until I played the final product. So after some time I did, and I believe you already know, I became a die-hard fan of it. The demos were right. They promised an excellent tactical RPG with a killer story, multiple routes and endings, and it delivered masterfully. This is one of the best strategy RPGs of this modern generation, if not the absolute best. Number 1. Tales of Legendia. This one, I have to tell my little story again. Got my PS2 about 17 years ago with 10 games that the seller let me pick. I had never heard of the Tales series before, never. I just thought it looked like an RPG, so I picked it up. When I tried this game, I was very confused, but in a good sense. I was surprised. This type of gameplay I had seen before many times, a very traditional style, going from town to town, overworld random encounters, yeah. But the combat was, getting into random battles to fight in 2D, like in one of those old beat-em-up games, and with party members, it blew me the heck away. It didn't take me long to fall in love with the story, the progression, the pacing, the music, and some of the characters, but I got to a point where the game glitched out and wouldn't let me enter a town to continue. It broke my heart. After reloading my file a few times, it just didn't work. So I had to give it up despite my enthusiasm. Every now and then I will put it on just to see if the glitch had fixed itself or something, but nope. So eventually I abandoned the game for good and didn't go back to it until a year or two later. For some strange reason, the last time I tried it on finally worked, the glitch was gone, and I was able to continue the adventure. Don't ask me how that happened, I have no idea. So I kept playing, only for the game to surpass my expectations even more. I watched the ending and the credits, but it wasn't over! A whole new journey was awaiting me known as the character episodes. The game focusing an entire chapter on just one character aside from the protagonists. It turned out that I was only halfway through the game, and no, this didn't feel like a post-game to me or anything. The main story continued like nothing because it needed to. Barely anything is conclusive before the first credits. So anyway, I had never seen an RPG do something like this. It made me a big Tales fan, and it is still to date my favorite title in the series. So those were 10 more JRPGs that surpassed my expectations, plus a very good honorable mention. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you next time!